Age 13. This ends up being something important to understand. It ties into the knowledge of good and evil. This will just be an interesting thing that people have never heard before, I'm sure. And it's something that dawned on me as I was studying these things, and I realized what the knowledge of good and evil was, and its maturity. Okay? And once I realized that, it's hard to explain, but I basically came to see that this age 13 is important to understand. And basically, take a look. I'll start with Adam and Eve. Look at Genesis 2:25.
And they were both naked, the man and his wife, and were not ashamed.
Something that no one's ever told you is that Adam and Eve at this point right here, some people may ask once in a while, what age were Adam and Eve at? And the answer is that they were just on the threshold of age 13. And they did not have the knowledge of good and evil. They weren't matured. And that is essentially what it means when it says they were naked and were not ashamed. So, in Genesis 3, this incident that occurs here, the day this happens, and actually right here at this point, Genesis 3:7.
And the eyes of them both were opened, and they knew that they were naked.
This is when they turned 13 right here. So this incident, the fall, happened on Adam's 13th birthday, so to speak. And Adam and Eve were, I guess something I forgot to say was that Adam and Eve were not aging. They were kind of suspended in time, you know. But then in chapter 3, this incident occurs, and this is their 13th birthday. And, okay, then next, look in Genesis chapter 4 concerning Cain and Abel. In verse 3 it says,
And in process of time it came to pass that Cain brought of the fruit of the ground an offering unto the Lord, and Abel he also brought of the firstlings of his flock and of the fat thereof.
Right here where it says, and in the process of time, if you use Blue Letter Bible and look at how that phrase is used elsewhere, you'll see that it means after a certain amount of time, such and such happens. And I just point that out because scholars will say things like, this means it was harvest time. So Cain brings his harvest from his labors. And I don't think that's what it means. I think it means they turned 13. Adam had built an altar and had been responsible for the worship up to this point, but now they had turned 13 and they were offering their offerings.
I could kind of tell from verse 3, and in the process of time it came to pass. It seems like Moses is writing that, kind of what you were saying, this amount of time, this significant amount of time has passed, significant as in aligning with the age 13. It seems like this, the way it just, to me, it seems like the way he's saying it, this time has passed, now Cain and Abel have got to this certain age where now they are about to present an offering. So I kind of see that too.
It just means at the end of a designated time. And it doesn't have to mean anything to do with harvesting. It means they turned 13. And Cain and Abel both turned 13 at the same time on the same day because they were twins. A lot of people don't know that. In Genesis 4:1, it says,
And Adam knew Eve his wife, and she conceived, and bare Cain, and said,
I have gotten a man from the Lord.
And she again bare his brother Abel.
Now, you'll notice that, she didn't conceive again. She just bare again. And this is the birth of twins.
It also doesn't say in verse 2 that Adam knew his wife Eve again. Like it doesn't say that again as if it could be two separate births or something.
Yeah. And it could mean one or the other, but it means they were twins. Like a lot of people have never noticed that, So it's just something interesting. And in the process of time, it came to pass. See, now Adam had built an altar, as I talked about in the video Altars of Eden, where God made coats of skins for Adam and Eve. Adam built an altar there and worshiped the Lord outside the garden. And it would be to this altar that Cain and Abel then brought their offerings when they turned 13. The next verse concerning this age 13 issue is in Genesis 16. In Genesis 16:16, it says,
And Abram was 86 years old when Hagar bare Ishmael to Abram.
And so that means he was 86. If you turn to the next chapter then and look in verse 1.
And when Abram was 90 years old and 9, the Lord appeared to Abram and said unto him,
I am the Almighty God. Walk before me, and be thou perfect. And I will make my covenant between me and thee, and will multiply thee exceedingly.
So this is 13 years later, and this is when Abraham is circumcised, and he has his son Ishmael circumcised here in verse 23. Let me see.
Actually, it says in verse 25, and Ishmael's son was 13 years old when he was circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin.
Mm-hmm.
And the significance of 13 kind of comes from the Jewish tradition of a person is now, a man or an adult at this time, at this age, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, Genesis 17:25. But we'll get into an even better verse that establishes it all.
Very cool.
The next verse is in Genesis 22, which is a real important chapter in my whole study. And this is when Abraham has Isaac on Mount Moriah. And it is impossible to tell if Isaac is 13 in this event, but he could have been. It could have fallen right at that time. And in verse 7,
And Isaac spake unto Abraham his father, and said,
My father.
And he said,
Here am I, my son.
And he said,
Behold the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for a burnt offering?
And Abraham said,
My son, God will provide himself a lamb for a burnt offering.
So you can infer from this that Isaac has been acquainted with bringing an offering to an altar. So it could be Isaac's 13 in this event as well. But here's the big event that really defines the meaning of age 13 in the Jewish mind. And this is in Genesis 34. It's Genesis 34:25.
And it came to pass on the third day, when they were sore, that two of the sons of Jacob, Simeon and Levi, Dinah's brethren, took each man his sword, and came upon the city boldly, and slew all the males.
But what happens here is a guy rapes Dinah, Jacob's daughter, and Dinah's brother Levi gets revenge. But in Genesis 34:25, took each man his sword.
Took each man his sword.
Now, in this verse, it identifies Simeon and Levi as men. So a very famous rabbi named, and I'm going to butcher this because he has an unusual name here, but his name is Menachem Mendel Schneerson. So Rabbi Schneerson, he carefully calculated things right down to the day that Levi turned 13, and it was the day of this event in Genesis 34:25. He, in his diaries that are in Hebrew, they're available. You can actually purchase his material, but it's in Hebrew, and there's no English translation. But there is English translations of it online, and I'll leave a link to it in the description to the video so people can check it out. And let me see, it is an entry in his diary called Reshemas number 21, age 13 for mitzvahs. The proof that Levi was exactly 13 on the day he killed the inhabitants of Shechem, the source of the age for bar mitzvah. And this diary entry has been translated into English and made available online, and I'll include it. But this verse to the rabbis is central in establishing age 13 for bar mitzvah. So why do I bring this up, this age 13? Well, turn to Luke 2.
When you say Luke 2, the first thing that comes to my mind is, I think, Jesus' early life.
Yep.
Now his parents went to Jerusalem every year at the feast of the Passover. And when he was 12 years old, they went up to Jerusalem after the custom of the feast. And when they had fulfilled the days, as they returned, the child Jesus tarried behind in Jerusalem, and Joseph and his mother knew not of it. But they, supposing him to have been in the company, went a day's journey, and they sought him among their kinsfolk and acquaintance. And when they found him not, they turned back again to Jerusalem, seeking him. And it came to pass that after 3 days they found him in the temple, sitting in the midst of the doctors, both hearing them and asking them questions. And all that heard him were astonished at his understanding and answers. And when they saw him, they were amazed. And his mother said unto him,
Son, why hast thou thus dealt with us? Behold, thy father and I have sought thee sorrowing.
And he said unto them,
How is it that ye sought me? Wist ye not that I must be about my father's business?
And they understood not the saying which he spake unto them. And he went down with them, and came to Nazareth, and was subject unto them. But his mother kept all these sayings in her heart. And Jesus increased in wisdom and stature, and in favor with God and man.
In this episode here, it says in verse 42 that Jesus was 12. And I would suggest he was getting toward 13. And I would suggest to people studying that this age right here, Jesus at this age right here, is the age Adam was in the Garden of Eden before the fall. So let's see here. The post-resurrection appearances then in Luke 24.
And behold, 2 of them went that same day to a village called Emmaus, which was from Jerusalem about 60 furlongs. And they talked together of all these things which had happened. And it came to pass that while they communed together and reasoned, Jesus himself drew near and went with them. But their eyes were holden that they should not know him. And he said unto them,
What manner of communications are these that ye have one to another as ye walk, and are sad?
And the one of them, whose name was Cleopas, answering, said unto him,
Art thou only a stranger in Jerusalem, and hast not known the things which are come to pass there in these days?
And he said unto them,
What things?
And they said unto him,
Concerning Jesus of Nazareth, which was a prophet, mighty indeed in word before God and all the people, and how the chief priests and our rulers delivered him to be condemned to death, and have crucified him. But we trusted that it had been he which should have redeemed Israel. And beside all this, today is the third day since these things were done. Yea, and certain women also of our company made us astonished, which were early at the sepulchre. And when they found not his body, they came, saying that they had also seen a vision of angels, which said that he was alive. And certain of them which were with us went to the sepulchre and found it, even so as the women had said. But him they saw not.
Then he said unto them,
O fools, and slow of heart to believe all that the prophets have spoken. Ought not Christ to have suffered these things, and to enter into his glory?
And beginning at Moses and all the prophets, he expounded unto them in all the scriptures the things concerning himself.
In verse 17, Jesus just kind of joins himself to the guys walking along the road, and it's like, what's this you're talking about? And they start talking about the things concerning Jesus of Nazareth, which was a prophet. And Luke 24:21, but we trusted that it had been he which should have redeemed Israel. And beside all this, today is the third day since these things were done. That's important. They trusted that it had been he which should have redeemed Israel. And something that Jesus' disciples struggled with, even at this late time, was the teaching that the Messiah had to first suffer and then usher in the kingdom. They just had trouble with that teaching. They thought the Messiah would triumphantly come into power. They didn't think that he would suffer and then come into power. And not knowing that this first phase needed to occur was something they struggled with. And you can see this in different verses. In the second half of Christ's ministry, he starts bringing this out, and his disciples struggle with what he means by it, like toward the end of Luke 18.
Then he took unto him the 12, and said unto them,
Behold, we go up to Jerusalem, and all things that are written by the prophets concerning the Son of Man shall be accomplished. For he shall be delivered unto the Gentiles, and shall be mocked, and spitefully entreated, and spitted upon. And they shall scourge him, and put him to death. And the third day he shall rise again.
And they understood none of these things, and this saying was hid from them, neither knew they the things which were spoken.
We're in Luke 24. It's just in Luke 18 that comes up. That they still didn't understand this. And so at this point here, you can tell in verse 21, but we trusted that it had been he which should have redeemed Israel. They were still struggling with this issue. And Jesus, you can see in verse 25, O fools and slow of heart to believe all that the prophets have spoken. Ought not Christ to have suffered these things and to enter into his glory? And beginning at Moses and all the prophets, he expounded unto them in all the scriptures the things concerning himself. So they're walking along the road, and this young man that's joined along, asking them what they're talking about, and they feel a little surprised that they need to tell him. But then this young man starts referring in a sort of allegorical manner to pictures of Jesus suffering all through the Pentateuch and so forth. And so that would have been impressive. They would have thought that here's someone that heard Jesus and got it or something. They would have been impressed by this, you know.
And they drew nigh unto the village whither they went. And he made as though he would have gone further, but they constrained him, saying,
Abide with us, for it is toward evening, and the day is far spent.
And he went in to tarry with them. And it came to pass, as he sat at meat with them, he took bread, and blessed it, and brake, and gave to them. And their eyes were opened, and they knew him. And he vanished out of their sight. And they said one to another,
Did not our heart burn within us while he talked with us by the way, and while he opened to us the Scriptures?
And it's just as when you see a photo, a high school photo of an old friend or something like that, a childhood photo of a good friend. It might take a moment before you realize it's them. And that is just the kind of experience they had here. Jesus was 13. And here's the real surprising thing for people to try to understand. When we're raised from the grave, we will be 13 once again.